My mother just threatened to take my children away. Not because I am a bad parent, not because they are in danger, but because I finally stopped sending her money. The letter sat on my lap, 2 pages of cream-colored stationery with her perfect cursive handwriting. If you cannot prove within 14 days that you are providing adequate housing for my grandchildren, I will be forced to contact Child Protective Services. The same elegant loops she used to sign my birthday cards, now weaponized into a legal threat. No concern, no offer to help, just a legal threat on expensive stationery. 2 weeks ago, I had stood in a parking lot watching our apartment burn while my children clung to me, Leo crying for his stuffed dinosaur still inside, Mia too shocked to make a sound. With trembling hands, I sent one message to the family group chat. We are safe, but we lost everything. I do not know where we are going to go. Eleanor read it at 6:47 p.m. Richard at 6:47 p.m. Jessica at 6:48 p.m. I stared at those 3 little check marks, waiting for my phone to ring. Waiting for someone to ask if we needed a place to stay, if the kids were hurt, if we had clothes or food or anything at all. Silence. Then, at 7:15 p.m., Jessica posted a photo album from my mother's backyard. 23 pictures of a barbecue party, string lights, wine glasses, my stepfather at his new grill. Everyone laughing. The caption, "Nothing beats quality time with the people who matter most. #blessed. #family comes first." They saw my message. They knew we were homeless. They chose Instagram over answering. Sitting on Sarah's couch now, that letter heavy in my hands, everything clicked into place. $6,000 I gave Jessica for student loans I was still paying off myself. $2,000 for her car, $3,000 to save Richard's failing business. $300 every single month for 18 months to cover their mortgage. $19,000 total while I skipped meals to afford my kids' school supplies. The second I had nothing left to give, I stopped mattering. Worse than disposable. I had become a threat that needed to be neutralized. Behind me, Leo patiently showed Mia how to color inside the lines. Their grandmother, who tucked $20 bills in birthday cards and signed them with hearts, had just threatened to take them from me. Something shifted in my chest. Not heartbreak. That ship had sailed 2 weeks ago in that parking lot. This was cold fury sharpening into focus. They wanted war? I would give them one. If you have ever been used as a family ATM, if you have ever given everything only to be thrown away when the well ran dry, if your own blood has threatened you for finally saying no, you need to hear what happened next. This gets ugly, but it ends with me winning. Real quick, hit that like button. Subscribe because you will want to see how this plays out. And comment below because I need to know I am not insane for what I am about to tell you. For years, they made me believe I was. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the fire, before I knew what my family really thought of me. My name is Chloe Bennett. I am 32, a single mother of 2. Leo is 7, dinosaur obsessed, the kind of kid who corrects adults when they confuse a brachiosaurus with a brontosaurus. Mia is 4, all wild curls and imagination, turning our tiny apartment into castles one day and spaceships the next. We lived in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in a Section 8 apartment on the east side of town. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business because everyone had their own struggles to deal with. Our building was old, built sometime in the 70s, with thin walls that let you hear every argument from the neighbors and heating that worked only when it felt like it. The kitchen appliances were ancient, the kind that made ominous sounds when you used them, and I had been putting off asking the landlord to replace the gas stove because I was terrified he would use it as an excuse to raise the rent. I worked 2 jobs to survive. Days at Fashion Sense, a discount clothing store downtown, minimum wage, rude customers, and a manager who thought hovering was leadership. Nights doing freelance graphic design after the kids went to bed. Logo designs for startups, social media graphics for influencers, menu layouts for restaurants. Whatever paid, money was always tight. There were weeks when I had to choose between buying Leo new shoes that fit or paying the electricity bill on time. Weeks when dinner was rice and beans 4 nights in a row because that was all I could afford. Weeks when I lay awake at night doing math in my head, trying to figure out how to stretch $73 across 10 days until my next paycheck. But I told myself we were managing. We had a roof over our heads, even if it leaked when it rained hard. We had food, even if it was not always what the kids wanted. We had each other, and I believed, deeply and sincerely believed, that we had family we could count on if things ever became truly desperate. My mother, Eleanor Margaret Bennett, was 56 years old, and had been the center of my universe for most of my life. She was the kind of woman who commanded a room without raising her voice, who kept her home spotlessly clean, who never left the house without lipstick and earrings. She had raised me and my sister mostly on her own after my biological father left when I was 3. I barely remembered him, just vague impressions of a tall man who smelled like cigarettes and always seemed angry. When I was 10, Eleanor married Richard Thompson, a hardware store owner who seemed stable and responsible, everything my biological father had not been. Richard adopted Jessica, who was 6 at the time, but never formally adopted me. Eleanor said it was because I was old enough to remember my real father and it would be disrespectful to his memory. I did not understand then that this small distinction would become symbolic of how I would always be treated differently. Richard was not a bad stepfather, exactly. He was present. He paid the bills. He came to some of my school events. But there was always a distance between us, an invisible wall that I could never quite breach. He called Jessica, sweetheart and honey. He called me by my first name, if he addressed me directly at all. When Jessica needed something, he jumped to provide it. When I needed something, he would sigh and say we would see what we could do. Jessica Ann Bennett, my half-sister, was 4 years younger than me, and for most of our childhood, I adored her. I was the protective older sister who helped her with homework, who braided her hair before school, who beat up Billy Morrison in 6th grade after he made her cry. I genuinely wanted the best for her. I wanted her to have all the opportunities I felt I had missed. As we grew older, the dynamic shifted in ways I did not fully recognize until much later. Jessica was the pretty one, the social one, the one who always seemed to land on her feet. She was homecoming princess in high school. She dated the quarterback. She got accepted to a 4-year university while I was struggling through community college and working part-time at a grocery store to pay for it. I got pregnant with Leo when I was 24. His father, Tom Rodriguez, was a guy I'd been dating for about 8 months. He seemed nice enough, said all the right things about commitment and building a future together. But the moment I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. Literally. He moved out of his apartment, blocked my number, and I heard through mutual friends that he had relocated to Colorado. I never saw him again, never received a single dollar of child support, never got so much as an apology. Eleanor was disappointed in me. I could see it in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it behind supportive words. She helped me through the pregnancy, let me move back home for a few months after Leo was born, but there was always an undercurrent of judgment. Richard barely acknowledged the situation, treating Leo like an inconvenience that disrupted his household peace. Jessica, meanwhile, was finishing her marketing degree, landing internships, building her career. At family dinners, Eleanor would beam while Jessica talked about her latest professional accomplishment, then turn to me and ask, with thinly veiled concern, how the job search was going, whether I had thought about going back to school, whether I had any plans beyond retail work. I moved out of Eleanor and Richard's house when Leo was 6 months old, finding that cheap apartment on the east side. It was hard, impossibly hard, but I was determined to prove I could make it on my own. I was determined to show everyone, including myself, that I was not a failure just because I was a single mother. Then, when Leo was 3, I met Daniel Park. He was a line cook at a restaurant downtown, funny and kind and good with Leo. We dated for a year, and I thought maybe, finally, I had found someone who would stay. We got married at the courthouse on a Friday afternoon with Sarah as our witness. Eleanor and Richard did not attend. They said they had a prior commitment, some hardware convention Richard had to attend, but Jessica later let slip that Eleanor had told her she did not see the point in celebrating when she did not think the marriage would last. Eleanor was right. The marriage lasted 8 months. Daniel had demons I had not seen during our courtship. He struggled with depression and had a drinking problem he had hidden from me. When I got pregnant with Mia, he spiraled. The drinking got worse. He became emotionally distant, then verbally cruel. He never hit me, but the things he said cut just as deep. He told me I had trapped him. He told me he had made a mistake. He told me I was dragging him down into my pathetic life. I left him when I was 7 months pregnant, moving back into my old apartment with Leo. Daniel did not fight me on it. He signed the divorce papers without argument and disappeared from our lives as completely as Tom had. I gave birth to Mia alone, with only Sarah in the delivery room to hold my hand. This time, Eleanor did not even pretend to hide her disappointment. She said I had a pattern of choosing the wrong men. She said maybe I needed to look at what I was doing to drive them away. She said this in front of Richard and Jessica at a family dinner when Mia was 2 weeks old, while I was still bleeding and exhausted and trying to figure out how to keep a toddler and a newborn alive on my own. But I still bought into the whole family thing, even with the judgment, the distance, the constant disappointment written all over their faces. I believed Eleanor when she said family shows up when it matters. I believed her favorite line, the one she drilled into my head since I was old enough to understand it. Family comes first. Family takes care of their own. So when Jessica called me 3 years ago, crying because she was $25,000 in student loan debt and could not make her payments, I helped. I did not have $25,000. I barely had $25 most weeks. But I took out a personal loan, a high-interest loan from one of those predatory lenders that charge rates that should be illegal, and I gave her $6,000 to make a large payment that would stop the collections calls and late fees. Jessica promised she would pay me back. She promised it was just temporary, just until she got her footing in her marketing job. But months turned into a year, and a year turned into 2 years, and she never mentioned the money again. When I finally worked up the courage to ask about it, she got defensive. She said I had offered to help, that she had never asked me to take out a loan, that I should not have done it if I could not afford it. Eleanor, when I mentioned it to her, sided with Jessica. She said sisters should help each other without keeping score. Then there was the car incident. Jessica rear-ended someone while texting and driving. Her insurance rates skyrocketed, and she needed $2,000 to pay for repairs to keep her car running so she could get to work. Again, she called me in tears. Again, I helped. I worked extra freelance projects, took on a third job delivering groceries on Sunday mornings, and scraped together the money. Again, she promised to pay me back. Again, she never did. The most significant amount I gave them was $3,000 for Eleanor and Richard last year. Richard's hardware store was struggling, genuinely struggling. Big box stores had moved into the area and were undercutting his prices. Online shopping was eating into his customer base. He was months behind on his commercial rent and facing eviction, which would mean losing the business he had built over 25 years. Eleanor called me, her voice thick with worry, and explained the situation. She said they might lose the house too if the store went under because they had taken out a second mortgage to keep the business afloat. She said Richard was too proud to ask for help, but she was asking me, as her daughter, to help save the family business. I scraped together $3,000. My landlord agreed to a payment plan when I explained why I was short on rent. For 2 weeks, my kids ate buttered pasta for dinner while I told myself it was fine, that this was what family did for each other. Eleanor had said family comes first. I was stupid enough to believe her. They never paid me back either. When I brought it up 6 months later, Richard got defensive and angry. He said I had given it as a gift, that family does not charge interest or demand repayment. Eleanor said I was being selfish and small-minded to even mention it. Jessica, who had been at the house when this conversation happened, rolled her eyes and said, I always had to make everything about money. But I pushed it down. I swallowed my resentment and told myself they would have done the same for me if I needed it. I told myself that this was what family meant, sacrifice and support without keeping score. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Jessica would text me only when she needed something, never just to check in or see how the kids were doing. The way Eleanor would call and spend an hour talking about her problems, her aching back, her difficult neighbors, Richard's stress, but would cut the conversation short when I tried to share my own struggles. The way Richard would grunt acknowledgement when I visited, barely looking up from his newspaper, treating me like an obligation rather than a daughter. I can see now how they trained me to be their emotional and financial support system without offering anything in return. How they made me feel guilty for having needs. How they praised me for being strong and independent, which really meant they expected me to handle everything alone while still being available to rescue them. But I did not see it then. I saw a family I was desperate to be fully part of, a family I kept trying to prove myself worthy of joining. Then came that Friday evening in early October, the evening that burned away my illusions as surely as the fire burned away my home. I had just gotten home from my shift at Fashion Sense. It had been a particularly exhausting day. A woman had screamed at me because we did not have her size in a clearance dress. Todd had written me up for being 3 minutes late returning from my lunch break, even though I had stayed 20 minutes past closing the week before to help with inventory. My feet ached, my head pounded, and I wanted nothing more than to collapse on the couch, but I had 2 hungry kids who deserved a decent meal. Leo was doing homework at our small kitchen table, working through subtraction problems with the intense concentration he applied to everything academic. Mia was on the living room floor surrounded by crayons and paper, drawing what she informed me was a family of unicorns going to the moon. The apartment was messy in the way all homes with small children are messy: toys scattered across the floor, dishes in the sink from breakfast, a basket of laundry I had meant to fold 3 days ago. I decided to make spaghetti, something simple and filling. Leo loved helping me cook, so I set him up washing cherry tomatoes in the sink while I boiled water in our dented old pot. Mia wandered in, asking if she could help too, and I gave her the job of counting out napkins for the table, which she took very seriously. The gas stove had been acting up for months. Sometimes the burner would not light, requiring multiple attempts. Sometimes it would light, but the flame would sputter and go out. I had mentioned it to our landlord, Mr. Kowalski, twice, but he kept saying he would get to it and never did. I had learned to work around it, being extra careful, keeping a lighter nearby for when the ignition did not work. That evening, I was waiting for the water to boil, stirring jarred sauce in a smaller pot on the back burner. Leo was telling me about a book he had read about velociraptors. Mia was humming to herself at the table. It was one of those ordinary, peaceful moments that makes up the texture of life with small children. The explosion behind the stove came without warning. Sparks shot from the outlet. The ancient wiring finally gave out, igniting the gas line. Flames exploded behind the stove, spreading to the grease-caked cabinets faster than I could process what was happening. I screamed. Leo dropped his bowl. Mia started crying. No time to think. I grabbed Mia with one arm, Leo's hand with the other, and ran. The hallway filled with smoke. The alarm shrieked. Neighbors poured out of apartments. Mrs. Chen asking what happened. Marcus already on the phone with 911 yelling about children in the building. We all rushed for the exits. Outside in the parking lot, I set Mia down and checked them both frantically. No burns, no injuries, just terror. Leo sobbed for his stuffed dinosaur still inside. Mia shook against my leg, too scared to speak. The fire trucks arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, lights flashing. Firefighters in heavy gear rushed into the building while we all stood in the parking lot watching. More neighbors had gathered. Some people were filming on their phones. Mrs. Chen was wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, crying softly. I watched as flames became visible in our third-floor window. I watched as firefighters broke through, as water started pouring into the apartment. I watched as everything I owned, every possession, every memory, every single thing that made that place our home, was destroyed. Someone from the Red Cross showed up, a kind woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Patricia, the same name as my middle name. She had blankets and information about emergency housing. She asked if I had family I could stay with. The question hit me like a physical blow because yes, I had family. And they should be here. They should be on their way. They should be the first call I made. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The screen was cracked from when I had dropped it a month ago and could not afford to fix it. I opened the family group chat, the one Eleanor had created 2 years ago, and named it Family First. The last messages were from a week ago, Jessica sharing photos from a weekend trip to the Mall of America, Eleanor commenting with heart emojis. I typed out a message, my thumbs clumsy with shock and adrenaline. We are safe, but there was a fire. The apartment is gone. We lost everything. I do not know where we are going to go. I hit send and watched the message appear in the chat. Then I watched as the status changed. Delivered. Then, one by one, the read receipts appeared. Eleanor had seen it at 6:47 p.m. Richard had seen it at 6:47 p.m. Jessica had seen it at 6:48 p.m. I waited for the typing indicator. Those 3 little dots that would mean someone was responding. I waited for my phone to ring. I waited for literally any acknowledgement that my family had received the message that their daughter, their sister, their grandchildren had just lost their home and everything they owned. Nothing came. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. I refreshed the chat, thinking maybe there was some technical issue, some glitch that was preventing their messages from coming through. But no, the read receipts were still there, clear and undeniable. The Red Cross volunteer, Patricia, was still talking to me about emergency shelters, about assistance programs, about next steps. I nodded along, barely processing her words. My brain was stuck on those read receipts, trying to make sense of them. Maybe there was an emergency on their end. Maybe someone was hurt. Maybe their phones had died right after they read the message. Half an hour passed. The firefighters had contained the blaze, but our apartment was completely destroyed. The fire chief, a burly man with a soot-streaked face, came over to tell me that the fire had started from an electrical failure behind the stove. He said we were lucky to have gotten out when we did, that if we had been asleep or if I had hesitated even 30 seconds longer, the outcome could have been very different. I thanked him, my voice hollow. Lucky. We were lucky. We were alive, standing in a parking lot with nothing but the clothes on our backs, and we were lucky. An hour after I sent the message, still no response from my family. I started checking their social media, something I had never done before, feeling pathetic and desperate but unable to stop myself. Eleanor's Facebook page showed no recent activity. Richard did not use social media much. But Jessica posted constantly. I refreshed her page, and there it was. A new photo album, posted at 7:15 p.m., 33 minutes after she had read my message about the fire. The album was titled Family BBQ Night and contained at least 20 photos. There was Jessica in a flowing floral sundress, holding a glass of white wine, her makeup perfect, her smile bright. There was Eleanor wearing a shirt I recognized as new, standing next to Richard, who was manning an expensive-looking gas grill, the kind that probably cost more than a month of my rent. There were plates of food, burgers and hot dogs and corn on the cob. There were string lights in the background, creating a warm, festive atmosphere. And there, in the third photo, was Brenda Walsh, Jessica's best friend since high school. Brenda was wearing a white t-shirt with glittery pink letters that spelled out family only across the chest. The caption on the album read, "Nothing beats quality time with the people who matter most. So grateful for nights like these. #blessed. #family time. #family comes first. #grateful. #making memories." I stared at that caption until the words blurred. Family comes first. The same phrase Eleanor had been drilling into me my entire life. The same phrase she used every time she needed something from me, every time she asked me to sacrifice, every time she reminded me what family meant. My family had read my message about losing our home. They had seen that we were safe but homeless. And instead of responding, instead of calling, instead of showing even the most basic human decency, they had continued with their barbecue party. They were laughing and drinking and celebrating family while I stood in a parking lot holding my traumatized children, watching smoke rise from the ruins of our home. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that I actually felt it physically. My chest constricted, my vision tunneled. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to breathe through what felt like a punch to my gut. A stranger, a woman I had never seen before who lived in another building in the complex, rushed over and asked if I was okay, if I needed medical attention. I waved her off. How could I explain this was not a medical emergency but an emotional one? That the people who should love me most had just proven I meant nothing to them? Leo tugged my shirt. "Are we going to Grandma's house now?" His innocent assumption that family would help broke me. I pulled both kids close, breathing in their smoke-tainted hair. I had one person left to call. One person who had never shared my blood but had shown me more loyalty than my entire family ever had. Sarah Mitchell had been my best friend since we met in a community college English class 10 years ago. We had bonded over terrible cafeteria, coffee, and all-night study sessions, supporting each other through breakups and job losses and all the chaos of our 20s. She was a nurse at the county hospital, working 12-hour shifts and barely making ends meet herself. But when I called her that night, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what had happened, she did not hesitate for even a second. "I will be there in 15 minutes, she said. "Do not move." She arrived in 12 minutes, her beat-up Honda Civic squealing into the parking lot. Sarah was 31, biracial with her mother's African-American features and her father's Irish coloring, her hair in long braids she often wore pulled back for work. She took one look at me, at my children, at the scene behind us, and just opened her arms. I collapsed into her hug and finally let myself cry. Not the silent tears I had been fighting back while trying to stay strong for Leo and Mia, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. Sarah held me and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would make this better. We drove to her apartment in silence. Leo and Mia fell asleep in the back seat almost immediately, exhausted from fear and adrenaline crash. Sarah lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the west side of town, the kind of place that was clean but cramped, where every inch of space was utilized out of necessity. She set us up on her pull-out couch, a lumpy old thing she had gotten from Goodwill years ago. The springs creaked every time anyone moved. The cushions were worn thin. But after what we had been through, it felt like the most comfortable bed in the world. Sarah made hot chocolate for the kids even though it was late, knowing they needed something comforting and normal. Mia asked if this was our new house now. The question was so innocent, so heartbreaking, that Sarah had to turn away to hide her expression. I told Mia we were just visiting Aunt Sarah for a little while, trying to keep my voice steady. After the kids finally settled into a fitful sleep, I sat in Sarah's small kitchen, the only light coming from above the stove. Sarah made tea even though neither of us really wanted it, the ritual of it giving us something to do with our hands. She sat across from me at her dinette table, the same table where we had studied for finals a decade ago, where we had eaten countless meals, where we had solved so many of life's problems over the years. She did not ask me if I had heard from my family. She could see from my face that I had not. Instead, she said, "They do not deserve you, Chloe. You know that, right?" I did not answer immediately, because even after everything, even with the evidence literally burning behind me just hours ago, even with the absolute silence from my family screaming louder than words ever could, part of me still wanted to make excuses. Maybe Eleanor's phone had died, maybe Richard had been driving, maybe Jessica had gotten busy with the party and forgot to respond. Maybe this was all some horrible misunderstanding that would be cleared up in the morning. But then I looked at my phone again. I looked at those red receipts, time-stamped and undeniable. I looked at Jessica's Facebook album, still up, people commenting about how fun it looked, how they were such a great family, asking when the next gathering would be. Eleanor had commented on several of the photos, posting heart and prayer hand emojis. Richard had even commented once, something uncharacteristic for him, saying he was grateful for family. And not one of them, not a single one, had acknowledged my message. I looked up at Sarah, this woman who had driven across town in the middle of a crisis without a second thought, who had opened her home to me and my children without hesitation, who had been there for every major moment in my life for the past 10 years, and I realized something that broke my heart even as it opened my eyes. Family was not about blood. It was about who showed up. And my blood relatives had not shown up. They had not shown up when my first marriage fell apart. They had not shown up when I was pregnant and alone. They had not shown up through years of struggling and sacrifice. And they were not showing up now, when I needed them most. "I will never let my kids grow up thinking this is what family looks like," I said quietly. "I will never teach them that love means accepting crumbs and calling it a feast." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Good," she said simply. I did not sleep that night. I lay on that pull-out couch with my children curled against me, Leo on one side and Mia on the other, and I stared at the ceiling as the hours ticked by. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames. Every time I drifted toward sleep, I jolted awake with my heart pounding, convinced I smelled smoke. But more than the trauma of the fire, more than the shock of losing everything we owned, what kept me awake was the growing realization of how long I had been fooling myself. The fire had not created my family's indifference. It had simply illuminated it. I thought about the $6,000 I had given Jessica, the $2,000 for her car, the $3,000 for Eleanor and Richard. I thought about the hundreds of small amounts over the years, $20 here, $50 there, gas money and grocery money, and helping with bills. I thought about all the times I had stretched my budget to breaking point to help them, telling myself it was what family did. I thought about how Jessica only texted me when she needed something. How our conversations always somehow became about her problems, her life, her needs. How when I tried to share my own struggles, she would offer shallow sympathy and then change the subject. I thought about Eleanor, how she had reacted to both my pregnancies with barely concealed disappointment. How she had made me feel like a failure for being a single mother, while simultaneously expecting me to be successful enough to financially support the family. How she praised me for being strong and independent, which really meant she expected me to handle everything alone while still being available to rescue everyone else. I thought about Richard, how he had never really accepted me as his daughter, how he had always treated me as Eleanor's baggage, an obligation he tolerated but never embraced. How he showed affection to Jessica but gave me only distant acknowledgement. The pattern had always been there. I had just been too desperate for family, too conditioned to be the helper and the giver, too afraid of being completely alone, to see it clearly. As dawn broke, pink light filtering through Sarah's thin curtains, I made a decision. I was done. I was done sacrificing myself for people who saw me as a resource, not a person. I was done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I was done believing that family meant unconditional giving with no expectation of receiving. I picked up my phone and looked at the family chat one more time. Still no response. Over 12 hours now since I had sent that message. 12 hours during which they could have shown even the smallest shred of human decency. I did not send another message. I just closed the app and put my phone down. Sarah emerged from her bedroom around 7, dressed in scrubs for her shift at the hospital. She looked exhausted, like she had not slept much either. She made pancakes for Leo and Mia, keeping them occupied while I took a shower, the first moment I had been alone since the fire. I stood under the hot water and let myself cry again, silently so the kids would not hear. I cried for the life we had lost. I cried for the family I thought I had but never really did. I cried for the innocence my children had lost, for the way they had seen their home burn, for the trauma they would carry. But when I turned off the water and dried my face, I looked at myself in Sarah's bathroom mirror and made myself a promise. This was rock bottom. Things were going to be hard, maybe the hardest they had ever been. But I was going to survive this. I was going to build something better for my children. And I was going to do it without depending on people who had proven they would not be there when it mattered. The next few days passed in a blur of practical necessities. I had to miss work at Fashion Sense, but thankfully Todd was decent enough not to fire me, probably because he knew it would look bad. I filed an insurance claim for what little renter's insurance I had, though the payout would be minimal. I contacted the school to let them know about Leo's situation, and they were wonderfully understanding, providing him with new school supplies and connecting me with a social worker. The Red Cross helped with immediate needs, providing vouchers for clothes and food. A local church charity gave us hygiene supplies. Sarah let us stay with her, insisting she did not mind the crowding even though I knew it was a huge imposition. We were living out of plastic bags, Leo and Mia sleeping in borrowed pajamas, eating meals perched on Sarah's small couch because her dinette table only had 2 chairs. Through all of this, absolute radio silence from my family. I checked the family chat compulsively for the first few days, unable to help myself. The read receipts stayed the same. No one had sent any new messages. It was like I had ceased to exist, but they were active on social media. Jessica posted about a new client she had landed at work. Eleanor shared a recipe for apple pie. Richard's store page advertised a sale on power tools. Their lives continued, completely unaffected by the fact that their daughter, sister, and grandchildren had lost everything. On the 4th day after the fire, I was at the laundromat washing the few clothes we had been donated, Mia sitting next to me playing with a donated teddy bear, when my phone rang. For a split second, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Eleanor or Jessica finally reaching out. It was a number I did not recognize, local area code. I answered cautiously. "Is this Chloe Bennett?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Andrea Thompson. I am calling from Sioux Falls Community Bank regarding your personal loan. You are now 17 days past due on your payment. We need to discuss bringing your account current." The personal loan, the one I had taken out 2 years ago to give Jessica $6,000 for her student loans. In the chaos of losing everything, I had completely forgotten about the monthly payment that was automatically withdrawn from my checking account. But my checking account was nearly empty, the automatic payment had bounced, and now I was in default. I tried to explain the situation to Andrea, about the fire, about being homeless, about needing a little time to get back on my feet. She was sympathetic but firm. The bank still needed payment. If I could not pay the full amount, could I at least pay something to show good faith? I checked my bank balance right there on my phone. After buying gas to get to and from the shelter services and picking up a few absolute necessities, I had $43 to my name. My next paycheck would not come for another 5 days. I told Andrea I would call her back and ended the call. I sat there in the laundromat, surrounded by the smell of detergent and the sound of industrial dryers, and I felt the walls closing in. The loan payment was $180 a month. $180 I had been paying faithfully for 2 years, sacrificing other things to make sure I kept up with it. All because I had helped my sister who had never paid me back and had not even bothered to respond when I told her I was homeless. That evening, after Sarah got home from her shift and we had fed the kids mac and cheese from a box, I sat down and did something I should have done years ago. I made a list of every single dollar I had given my family over the past 5 years. The numbers were staggering. The $6,000 for Jessica's student loans, the $2,000 for her car, $500 when she needed to make rent once, $200 when she was short on groceries, $150 when her phone broke, the $3,000 for Eleanor and Richard's business, $300 a month for the past year and a half, 18 months, to help with their mortgage, which totaled to $5,400. Smaller amounts here and there that I had lost track of, $50 for Eleanor's birthday gift she requested, $100 for Richard's truck repair, money for holiday dinners I brought to their house. The total came to just over $19,000. $19,000 I had given them over 5 years. $19,000 while I was struggling to feed my own children, to keep a roof over our heads, to pay my own bills. $19,000, and they could not even text me back when my home burned down. I showed the list to Sarah. She looked at it for a long moment, her jaw tightening, and then she said something I will never forget. You know what this is, right? This is not family helping family. This is financial abuse. They trained you to be their ATM machine, and the moment you had your own crisis and could not serve that function anymore, they discarded you. The words hit like cold water. Financial abuse. I had never thought of it that way, but she was right. They had conditioned me to believe that giving them money was how I proved my love, proved my worth, proved I deserved to be part of the family, and when I could not give any more, I was worthless to them. That night, I lay awake on Sarah's pull-out couch again, but this time it was not trauma keeping me awake. It was anger. Cold, clarifying anger that burned away the last remnants of my denial. I was done mourning a family that had never truly existed. I was done making excuses for people who had shown me exactly who they were. I was done sacrificing my children's well-being and my own mental health for people who would not cross the street to help me. 2 weeks after the fire, I was starting to find some stability. Sarah had to go to work, and I needed to be at my retail job, so we had worked out a complicated schedule involving dropping the kids at school and a local after-school program that offered sliding scale fees. I was still living out of plastic bags and sleeping on Sarah's couch, but I was managing. That morning, I was at Fashion Sense, restocking a rack of clearance sweaters, when my phone buzzed with a text message. I almost did not look at it, assuming it was something work-related or maybe a reminder about Leo's upcoming parent-teacher conference. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw it was from Eleanor. My hand started shaking before I even opened it. After 2 weeks of silence, she was finally reaching out. Part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in family, hoped it would be an apology. An explanation. Some acknowledgement of what we had been through. I opened the message. Patricia, the family needs $4,000 very urgently for an important matter. We need you to transfer it by Friday. This is critical. I read it 3 times. Convinced I must be misunderstanding. But no. No greeting. No inquiry about whether we were okay. No acknowledgement whatsoever that she had ignored my desperate message 2 weeks ago. Just a demand for money. $4,000. By Friday, 3 days away. I felt something crack inside me, like ice breaking under pressure. I did not respond. I just put my phone in my pocket and went back to work, moving through the rest of my shift in a kind of numb autopilot. That evening, Richard called. I stared at his name on my phone screen for 3 rings before I answered. Patricia. His voice was sharp, impatient. Your mother texted you about the money we need. We have not heard back from you. We need that money by Friday. You need that money, I repeated slowly. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, flat and cold. Yes, for an important family matter. This is not negotiable. Something in me snapped. Not negotiable? Where were you 2 weeks ago, Dad? Where were you when my apartment burned down? When your grandchildren were homeless? There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear how truly empty his concern was. Then he said, in the same irritated tone, This is not the time for drama, Patricia. We have always been there for you. Now we need you to step up and be there for us. That is what family does. Always been there for me? When? When have you ever been there for me without expecting something in return? Do not take that tone with me, he said, his voice rising. We raised you. We gave you a home. You owe us. I owe you? I repeated. I have given you $19,000 over the past 5 years. 19,000. Do you have any idea how many meals I skipped so I could send Jessica money? How many times I chose between paying my electric bill and helping you with your mortgage? That is what family does, Richard said, but now he sounded defensive. Family supports each other. Supports each other, I echoed. Where was my support 2 weeks ago? I sent you a message that my home had burned down. You read it, Eleanor read it, Jessica read it, and not one of you responded. Not one call, not one text. But you were all at a barbecue party that same night, posting on social media about how family comes first. We did not think it was that serious, Richard said, but his tone had shifted, less certain now. You did not think losing our home was serious? You did not think your grandchildren being homeless was serious? We assumed you would figure it out, he said. You always do. You are very capable. And there it was, the truth I had been avoiding for years. They did not see me as family. They saw me as a resource. I was useful when I could give them money, when I could solve problems, when I could make their lives easier. But the moment I had problems of my own, I was on my own. What exactly do you need $4,000 for? I asked. There was a pause. Then Richard said, That is family business. You do not need to know the details. Actually, I do. If you want money from me, I deserve to know what it is for. Richard sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that suggested I was being unreasonable. The store is having cash flow problems. The bank is threatening to call the loans. We need to make a large payment to buy time. So you want me, a homeless single mother living on a friend's couch, to give you $4,000 to save your failing business? The business I already gave you $3,000 for last year? That was different, Richard said. How? How was it different? This time we will pay you back. I actually laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You never paid me back before. Jessica never paid me back. Why would this time be different? Because we are family, Richard said, his voice hardening. And family takes care of family. You are right, I said. Family does take care of family. So when can I expect the $19,000 you owe me? The line went dead. Richard had hung up on me. I stood there in Sarah's kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Then I did something I had never done before. I blocked Richard's number, then Eleanor's number, then Jessica's number. I deleted the family group chat, and I felt, for the first time in weeks, like I could breathe. Sarah came home an hour later and found me sitting at her kitchen table, staring at my phone. She asked if I was okay, and I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she just nodded. Good, she said. You are done being their ATM. Now let us figure out how to get you and the kids into your own place. But my family was not done with me, not by a long shot. 3 days later, a Friday morning, I was scrolling Facebook during my lunch break at work when I saw a post in the Sioux Falls Parents United group, a local community group with over 3,000 members. The post was from an account I did not recognize, a generic name with no profile picture, clearly created just for this purpose. The post read, There is a single mother in our community with 2 young children, ages 7 and 4, who recently lost her apartment in a fire. Instead of focusing on getting stable housing and taking care of her kids, she is living in unstable conditions and neglecting their needs. Her children are being moved from place to place, missing school, and not receiving proper care. Someone needs to call Child Protective Services before these kids get seriously hurt. My blood ran cold. The post did not name me specifically, but the details were precise enough that anyone who knew about the fire would know exactly who it was referring to. And there were people who knew. Teachers at Leo's school, parents from Mia's preschool, neighbors from our old building. The post already had dozens of comments. Some people were defending single mothers in general, talking about how hard it was and how judgmental people should not be. But plenty of others were agreeing that CPS should be called, that kids in unstable housing situations were at risk, that it was better to be safe than sorry. I felt sick. Someone had created a fake account specifically to paint me as a neglectful mother. Someone who knew enough details about my situation to make the accusation seem credible. Someone who wanted to weaponize social services against me. I scrolled through the comments, looking for any clue about who might have posted it. Then I noticed something. Brenda Walsh, Jessica's best friend, had liked the post. And Brenda had been active in the group at the exact same time the post had been made, commenting on other threads. Brenda, who had been at that barbecue party wearing a family-only shirt. Brenda, who had always been fiercely loyal to Jessica and Eleanor. Brenda, who had once told me at a holiday gathering that I should be more grateful for everything Eleanor and Richard had done for me, despite not knowing anything about our actual relationship. I felt like I was going to be sick. My own family, or at least their proxy, was trying to use CPS as a weapon against me. They were trying to paint me as an unfit mother, potentially to force me to comply with their demands for money, or simply out of spite for cutting them off. I took screenshots of everything. The post, the comments, the timing of Brenda's activity in the group. I did not know what I would do with them yet, but I knew I needed documentation. That evening, an official-looking envelope arrived at Sarah's apartment, forwarded from my old address. Inside was a letter, handwritten on Eleanor's fancy monogram stationery. Dear Patricia, it has come to my attention that you and my grandchildren are living in unstable conditions following your unfortunate fire. While I understand you are going through a difficult time, my primary concern must be for Leo and Mia's well-being and safety. Your current living situation, staying on a friend's couch with no stable home, is not appropriate for young children. They need routine, stability, and proper care. Your recent behavior, cutting off family and refusing to communicate, suggests you are not in a mental state to be making good decisions for their welfare. If you cannot provide evidence within 2 weeks that you have secured appropriate housing and are meeting the children's needs, I will have no choice but to contact Child Protective Services to ensure my grandchildren are in a safe environment. This is not a threat. It is a grandmother's duty to protect her grandchildren when their mother is failing to do so. You brought this on yourself by choosing to prioritize pride over family. There is still time to make this right. Contact us. Accept our help. Stop this foolish rebellion and remember that family comes first. Eleanor M. Bennett. I read the letter twice, my hands trembling with rage. Accept their help? They had not offered any help. They had offered nothing except demands for money, and now threats to take my children. This was not about concern for Leo and Mia. This was about control. This was about punishing me for daring to say no, for daring to set boundaries, for daring to stop being their compliant ATM machine. I showed the letter to Sarah. She read it, her expression growing darker with each line. Then she looked at me and said, "You need a lawyer. Not next week, not when you can afford it. Now." I had been trying to handle everything on my own, trying to save money, trying not to be a burden. But Sarah was right. This had escalated beyond something I could handle alone. They were threatening my children. They were threatening to use the legal system to take away the only things in my life that mattered. That night, I did something I had never done before. I went online and searched for lawyers who handled family law and harassment cases in Sioux Falls. I needed someone tough, someone who would not back down, someone who understood that this was not just a family dispute, this was a battle. I found Arthur Grimshaw's website. His photo showed a man in his early 50s with steel gray hair and intense eyes. His bio described him as specializing in protecting clients from toxic family dynamics, restraining orders, and what he called financial family abuse. His reviews were mixed. People either loved him or hated him, but everyone agreed he was aggressive and uncompromising. I filled out the contact form on his website, briefly explaining my situation. I did not expect to hear back until Monday at the earliest, but 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Miss Bennett? This is Arthur Grimshaw. I just read your contact form. Can you talk now?" I stepped out onto Sarah's small balcony for privacy and told him everything. The years of financial support, the fire, the ignored messages, the demand for money, the anonymous Facebook post, the threatening letter from Eleanor. I told him about Leo and Mia, about how I was terrified of losing them, about how I felt like I was drowning. Arthur listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "Miss Bennett, what you are describing is not just a dysfunctional family. This is systematic financial exploitation and emotional abuse, culminating in threats to use CPS as a weapon of control. Do you want to fight this?" "Yes," I said immediately. "I want them to leave me and my children alone. I want them to understand that I am not their ATM anymore. And I want them to know they cannot threaten my children and get away with it." "Then here is what we are going to do," Arthur said. His voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that made me believe, for the first time in weeks, that I might actually win this. We set up a proper consultation for the next day, Saturday, at his office. The consultation fee was $200, money I absolutely did not have. Sarah loaned it to me without hesitation. Arthur's office was modest, in a small building downtown, nothing fancy or intimidating, just a functional space with law books on shelves and case files stacked on a desk. He offered me coffee, which I accepted gratefully, and then we got to work. I laid out everything. I brought printouts of bank statements showing every transfer to Jessica, Eleanor, and Richard over the past 5 years. I brought screenshots of my message in the family chat about the fire, with the read receipts showing they had seen it. I brought screenshots of Jessica's Facebook post from that same night, the barbecue party with its tone-deaf captions and hashtags. I brought the text message from Eleanor demanding $4,000. I brought Eleanor's threatening letter. I brought screenshots of the anonymous Facebook post in the parents' group, with notes showing Brenda's activity in the group at the same time. Arthur examined everything methodically, taking notes. After about 30 minutes, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me seriously. "Here is my professional assessment," he said. "You have been the victim of financial exploitation by your family members for years. They have conditioned you to believe that giving them money was how you proved your worth and maintained your place in the family structure. When you experienced your own crisis and were no longer able to serve that function, they not only abandoned you but actively attempted to punish you for setting boundaries. The threat to call CPS is particularly egregious because it shows intent to use the legal system as a weapon to force compliance. The anonymous Facebook post, if we can prove it was orchestrated by your family or their associates, constitutes defamation and possibly harassment. The demand for money while you were homeless is just, frankly, unconscionable." He paused, studying my reaction. "What do you want to happen here, Miss Bennett? Do you want them to apologize and reconcile? Do you want financial compensation? Do you want to ensure they cannot interfere with your life going forward? Because your goals will determine our strategy." I thought about that for a long moment. A month ago, maybe even a week ago, I might have said I wanted an apology. I might have said I wanted them to acknowledge how much they had hurt me. But I had learned something important. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot force someone to see your value. And I did not want anything from them anymore. "I want them to leave me and my children alone," I said finally. "I want legal protection from their harassment. I want them to know they cannot threaten my children and get away with it. And honestly, if they owe me $19,000 and never intend to pay it back, I want that on record." Arthur nodded. "Then we are going to do 3 things. First, we will file for a restraining order based on the harassment and threats. Second, we will file a civil suit for the money they owe you, which will put their financial exploitation on official record. Third, if they follow through on their threat to call CPS with false accusations, we will countersue for malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress." He continued, "I am going to be honest with you, Miss Bennett. This is going to get ugly. Once we file these documents, your family is going to escalate. They are going to be angry. They may try to turn other family members or community members against you. They may file countersuits. You need to be prepared for this to become very public and very nasty. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Leo asking why we could not go home. I thought about Mia waking up with nightmares about fire. I thought about sleeping on Sarah's couch for weeks because the people who were supposed to love me most had decided I was not worth basic human decency. I thought about that letter threatening to take my children away. "I am ready," I said. We spent the rest of that consultation planning strategy. Arthur explained that the restraining order would be filed first, on Monday, as an emergency motion. We would need to document every instance of harassment, every threat, every unwanted contact. We would include the Facebook post, even though it was anonymous, because the details and timing suggested insider knowledge. The civil suit for the money would be filed simultaneously. Arthur explained that even if I never saw a penny of that $19,000, having it officially documented as a debt would serve an important purpose. It would create a legal record of the financial exploitation, which would support the harassment case and counter any narrative that I was ungrateful or estranged from a loving family for no reason. Before I left his office, Arthur said something that stuck with me. "Miss Bennett, you have been trained to believe that setting boundaries makes you selfish, that protecting yourself makes you the bad guy. But I need you to understand something. Everything we are about to do is not revenge. It is self-defense. You have every right to protect yourself and your children from people who are trying to harm you, even if those people happen to share your DNA." That night, I sat down and did something I had been thinking about for days. I created an anonymous account on Reddit and found a community for single mothers dealing with family issues. I did not name names. I did not specify exactly where I lived, but I told my story. I wrote about being a single mother working 2 jobs to support my family while also financially supporting my extended family for years. I wrote about giving them thousands of dollars I could not afford, taking out loans to help them, sacrificing my own stability to ensure theirs. I wrote about the fire, about sending them a message that we were homeless, about them reading it and saying nothing while they attended a party that same night. I wrote about them demanding $4,000 from me 3 weeks later, while I was still homeless. I wrote about the threats to call CPS, about the anonymous post trying to paint me as a neglectful mother, about the letter from my mother saying I had brought this on myself. I ended the post with a simple question. At what point is it okay to walk away from toxic family? At what point is self-preservation, not selfishness? I posted it at 11 at night, expecting maybe a few dozen people would read it by morning. Maybe some supportive comments, maybe some advice. What I did not expect was to wake up 5 hours later to my phone buzzing continuously with Reddit notifications. The post had exploded overnight. It had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, and it was being shared across other subreddit communities. People were sending me private messages, sharing their own similar stories, expressing outrage at the family I had described. By noon the next day, my post had been screenshot and shared on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Bloggers who wrote about toxic family dynamics were writing articles about it. YouTube channels that discussed family drama were making videos about it. It had gone viral in a way I could never have predicted. And people were angry. Strangers from across the country were condemning the family I had described, calling them narcissistic, abusive, exploitative. Some people were trying to figure out who and where this family was, connecting dots and speculating. Then someone, I still do not know who, managed to make the connection to Sioux Falls. Maybe they recognized details from the local news about the apartment fire. Maybe they were local and put pieces together. But suddenly, people were speculating that this viral post was about a family in Sioux Falls. Someone else found Jessica's Facebook post about the barbecue party and noted that the timing matched the fire that had been in the local news. They compared the details in my Reddit post to the public information about the fire. The resemblance was too specific to be coincidence. Screenshots of Jessica's post, with its tone-deaf hashtags about family coming first, started circulating alongside screenshots of my Reddit post. People were making side-by-side comparisons. The story was no longer anonymous. Local community members were connecting the dots. And then my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. I had blocked her number on my phone, but she was calling from a different number. Probably her work phone. I answered. "What the hell did you do, Chloe?" Jessica's voice was shaking, not with concern but with fury. "That Reddit post is ruining my life. Do you know what you have done?" I stayed silent, letting her rant. "People at work are asking me about it. Clients are asking questions. My boss pulled me aside to ask if I am the sister in that viral post. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Is it true?" I asked quietly. "What? The post. Is it true? Did you read my message about the fire and say nothing? Did you go to a party that same night? Did Mom send me a letter threatening to call CPS?" "That is not the point," Jessica snapped. "Actually, it is exactly the point," I said. "If everything in that post is true, then you do not have a reputation problem. You have a behavior problem." "You are making us all look like monsters," Jessica said. "You are destroying our family." "I did not destroy our family, Jessica. I just finally stopped pretending it existed. Then I hung up. And I blocked that number too. 2 days later, I received a certified letter at Sarah's address. It was from a law firm in downtown Sioux Falls, one of the prestigious ones, with offices in a renovated historic building. Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica were suing me. The lawsuit claimed that my Reddit post, despite being anonymous, had clearly referenced them based on specific details that could not be coincidental. They claimed the post had caused severe damage to their reputations in the community, had affected Jessica's employment, had caused Richard's business to lose customers, and had subjected them to harassment and public ridicule. They were demanding I immediately delete the post and pay $50,000 in compensatory damages. $50,000. For telling my truth anonymously online. I took the letter to Arthur. He read it, and then he actually laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "This is one of the most ridiculous lawsuits I have seen in 20 years of practice," he said. "You did not name them. You did not even specify the city. The only reason anyone connected the post to them is because the details match their own public behavior, which they documented themselves on social media." He looked at me seriously. "Bennett, if they had just left you alone, this would have blown over. Your post would have stayed anonymous, a story among thousands of similar stories online. But by filing this lawsuit, by officially claiming that your post is about them, they have just confirmed to everyone that they are exactly the kind of people described in that post. So what do?" I asked. "We fight," Arthur said, "and we file a countersuit that will make them regret they ever picked this battle." The next week was a whirlwind of legal activity. Arthur filed our restraining order petition, documenting every instance of harassment, every threat, every unwanted contact. He filed a civil suit for the $19,000 they owed me, with documentation of every transfer and loan. He filed a motion to dismiss their defamation suit based on lack of evidence that I had specifically named them, and then he did something I did not expect. He filed a countersuit against Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica for harassment, financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with parental rights. The countersuit was comprehensive and devastating. It laid out, in legal language, the entire pattern of their behavior, the years of financial demands. The conditioning that made me believe giving them money was how I proved my worth. The ignored pleas for help during my crisis. The continued demands for money while I was homeless. The threats to weaponize CPS. The apparent orchestration of the anonymous Facebook posts through their associate Brenda. Arthur attached every piece of evidence we had. Bank statements, screenshots, text messages, the threatening letter. Testimony from Sarah about my character and the children's well-being. A statement from Leo's school confirming he was attending regularly and thriving. Documentation from the Red Cross and various charities showing I had been actively seeking help and resources. He also subpoenaed Facebook for the IP address and device information associated with the anonymous post in the parents' group. This was a long shot, but if we could prove it had been posted from Brenda's device, and if we could then prove Brenda had been acting on behalf of Jessica or Eleanor, it would be a smoking gun. The restraining order hearing was scheduled first, just 3 days after we filed. We went to court on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica were there with their lawyer, a man in his 60s in an expensive suit who looked like he had spent his career handling corporate law, not family disputes. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Morrison, who had a reputation for being no-nonsense and impatient with people wasting her time. Arthur had told me this was good for us. Judges like her could see through manipulation tactics. Our side presented first. Arthur laid out the chronology efficiently: the fire, the ignored message, the demand for money, the threatening letter, the Facebook post. Each piece of evidence was entered into the record with timestamps and context. Then their lawyer stood up to present their side. He tried to paint me as the aggressor, as someone who had made a private family matter public to gain sympathy and financial support. He suggested I was unstable, that my accusations were exaggerated, that Eleanor's letter had been a legitimate expression of grandmotherly concern. Arthur's cross-examination was surgical. He asked their lawyer to explain why, if they were so concerned about the children's welfare, they had not responded to my message for 2 weeks. He asked why, if they were concerned about the children being in an unstable environment, they had not offered to house us themselves given they had a 3-bedroom home. He asked why Eleanor's letter had specifically mentioned my refusal to communicate and accept their help when they had not actually offered any help, just demands for money. The judge asked Eleanor directly, "Mrs. Bennett, when your daughter sent you a message on October 6th informing you that her apartment had burned down and she and your grandchildren were homeless, why did you not respond?" Eleanor, composed and articulate, said, "Your Honor, I was at a family gathering when I saw the message. I assumed she had already made arrangements and would reach out if she needed something specific. I did not want to interfere when she has always been very independent." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You assumed a text message saying we lost everything and I do not know where we are going to go meant she had everything under control?" Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. She had her friend with her. "I knew she would not be on the street." Judge Morrison looked at the evidence again, at the timeline showing the barbecue party photos posted while I was homeless. Then she looked at Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica with an expression of barely concealed disgust. "The restraining order is granted," she said. "Eleanor Thompson, Richard Thompson, and Jessica Bennett are ordered to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from Chloe Bennett, her children, her residence, their schools, and her places of employment. No contact is permitted, directly or through third parties, except through legal counsel regarding the pending civil matters. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending resolution of the civil suits." She banged her gavel. Eleanor looked stunned. Jessica was crying. Richard's face had gone red with anger. But it was done. They could not contact me. They could not show up at Leo's school. They could not use CPS as a threat. I had legal protection. As we left the courthouse, Arthur said, "That is the first step. Now we prepare for the defamation suit and our countersuit. This is going to take months, Miss Bennett, but you did well in there." I felt lighter than I had felt since the fire. For the first time, I had legal protection. I had a lawyer who believed me. I had documentation of everything they had done. And I had the beginnings of hope that I could actually win this. But the battle was far from over. The real war was about to begin. The next 2 months were brutal. Word of the lawsuit and countersuit spread through Sioux Falls. The viral Reddit post was now definitively connected to my situation, and the local community was divided. Some people supported me, understanding that I had been exploited and was fighting back. But others, particularly people who knew Eleanor and Richard socially or did business with Richard's hardware store, thought I was an ungrateful daughter airing family drama for attention. Jessica's employer, a mid-sized marketing firm called Brightside Marketing, had been facing pressure from clients uncomfortable with the negative attention. 2 clients had specifically mentioned they were concerned about working with someone involved in such public family drama. A week after the restraining order was granted, Jessica was fired. Her boss told her, politely but firmly, that her continued employment had become a liability. Jessica did not take it well. She tried to call me, forgetting about the restraining order, and when I did not answer, she posted a long rant on Facebook about how I had destroyed her career, how I was vindictive and cruel, how everything that had happened was my fault. The post was public, and people screenshot it and sent it to Arthur. More evidence for our case. Richard's hardware store started losing customers. People in the community who had seen the viral post, who had heard about the lawsuit, started shopping at the big box stores instead. Some left negative reviews online, mentioning they could not support a business owner who treated family so poorly. Richard's income dropped by almost 40% in 6 weeks. Eleanor faced social consequences too. Their church community, which they had been active members of for over 20 years, grew distant. People who had been friends stopped inviting them to gatherings. The Bible study group Eleanor had hosted at her house for years quietly disbanded. Nobody wanted to be associated with the family that had abandoned their daughter and grandchildren after a house fire. Meanwhile, I was slowly rebuilding. The legal fees were terrifying, even though Arthur had agreed to work partially on contingency, meaning he would take a percentage of any money we won rather than requiring full payment up front. But I was managing. A local news story about families recovering from house fires had featured our situation, and a landlord named Margaret Kowalski, no relation to my previous landlord, reached out. She owned a small duplex on the south side of town and offered to rent me half of it at a significantly reduced rate until I got back on my feet. The place was old, the carpet was worn, the kitchen was tiny, but it was 2 bedrooms and it was ours. Moving day was bittersweet. Sarah helped me move our few belongings, which still fit into her Honda Civic because we had so little. Leo ran through the empty rooms, shouting with joy at having his own room again. Mia chose the smaller bedroom, the one with a window facing east, and asked if we could paint it light blue. We spent a weekend, Sarah and me and the kids, painting and cleaning. We bought discount paint and secondhand furniture from Goodwill. Leo insisted on Spider-Man-themed curtains for his room. Mia hung her crayon drawings on every available wall. It was not much, but it was ours, and nobody could take it from us. I also made a decision about the money Eleanor and Richard had been receiving from me. For the past year and a half, I had been sending them $300 a month to help with their mortgage, an arrangement Eleanor had set up when they claimed they were struggling. I had continued making these payments automatically, even after the fire, out of habit and guilt. I stopped the automatic transfer. That $300 a month, $3,600 a year, was money I needed for my own children. I opened a savings account for Leo and Mia and deposited that first $300. It felt like planting a seed for their future, a future where they would never feel obligated to set themselves on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. The defamation trial and countersuit were combined into one proceeding, scheduled for early December. Arthur explained this was unusual but efficient, allowing the judge to hear all the related claims at once. As the trial date approached, Arthur received the results of the Facebook subpoena. The anonymous post in the parents' group had indeed been made from Brenda Walsh's device, from her home IP address. Arthur then subpoenaed Brenda's phone records, which showed she had been in contact with Jessica 3 times in the hour before the post was made, and twice in the hour after. This was significant. While we could not prove the content of those phone calls, the timing was damning. It established a pattern of communication between Jessica and Brenda immediately before and after Brenda made a post attacking me. Arthur also discovered something else through the civil suit discovery process. The $4,000 Eleanor and Richard had demanded from me was not just for business cash flow problems. Richard's hardware store was in serious financial trouble, facing potential bankruptcy. He had taken out multiple high-interest loans, made poor business decisions, and was now underwater by almost $60,000. They had been desperate, and I was their emergency fund. The trial took place on a cold Tuesday in December. The courthouse was more crowded than I expected. Some people were there out of genuine curiosity about the viral Reddit case, others because they were local community members invested in the outcome. Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica sat on one side of the courtroom with their lawyer. They were dressed impeccably. Eleanor in a conservative navy suit, pearls at her throat, looking every bit the dignified matriarch. Richard in his best dress clothes, projecting solid respectability. Jessica in professional attire that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, but I was not intimidated. I sat next to Arthur, wearing a simple dress Sarah had helped me find at a thrift store. I had my evidence, I had my truth, and I had nothing left to lose. Their lawyer presented first, arguing that my Reddit post, while technically anonymous, contained details so specific that it could only refer to his clients. He presented evidence of the damage to their reputations, Jessica's job loss, customer reviews mentioning the family drama, screenshots of online discussions speculating about their identities. He painted me as bitter and vindictive, someone who was punishing her family for not being able to help during her crisis, someone who had weaponized social media to destroy innocent people's lives. Then Arthur stood up. "Your Honor, my client did not name the plaintiffs in her post. She did not specify a location. She did not include any identifying information beyond general details that could apply to many families. The only reason anyone connected this post to the plaintiffs is because the details match their own behavior they documented themselves on social media platforms like Facebook." He pulled up Jessica's barbecue post on the courtroom's display screen. The photos of the party, the hashtags about family coming first, the timestamp showing it was posted the same evening as the fire. The plaintiffs want to sue my client for writing about being abandoned during a crisis while they were at a party, but they publicly posted about that party themselves. They created the evidence that connects them to the story. My client simply told her truth. If that truth damaged their reputations, perhaps the issue is not the telling but the behavior itself. Arthur then methodically presented our evidence. The message in the family chat with the read receipts. The demand for money while I was homeless. Eleanor's threatening letter. The Facebook post from Brenda's device with the timing of her calls to Jessica. The bank statements showing $19,000 in transfers. The documented harassment. He called me to the stand. I testified about the years of financial exploitation, about believing family meant unconditional giving, about the fire and the silence that followed. I testified about my children, about Leo's nightmares, about Mia asking if Sarah's couch was our new home. I testified about the fear I felt when Eleanor threatened to call CPS, knowing that even unfounded accusations could trigger an investigation that would traumatize my children. Their lawyer tried to cross-examine me, to poke holes in my story, to suggest I was exaggerating or lying, but I had documentation for everything. Every transfer had a bank record. Every message had a screenshot. Every instance of harassment had a timestamp. Then Arthur called Eleanor to the stand. She maintained her composure, insisting that she had always loved me and her grandchildren, that she had been concerned about our welfare, that her letter had been an expression of legitimate grandmotherly concern. Arthur asked her, "Mrs. Bennett, you testified that you love your daughter and grandchildren. When they lost their home in a fire, how much money did you offer to help them?" Eleanor paused. "We were going through our own financial difficulties. I am not asking about your difficulties. I am asking how much money you offered your homeless daughter who has given you thousands of dollars over the years." "We offered her a place to stay. Did you? Do you have any text messages, emails, or phone records showing you made that offer?" Eleanor faltered. "It was understood that she could come to us if she needed to, but she did tell you she needed help. She sent a message to the family group chat saying she had lost everything and did not know where to go." "You read that message. What did you respond?" Eleanor's composure cracked. "I thought she would figure it out. She always does." "So when your daughter and grandchildren were homeless, you thought she would figure it out. But 3 weeks later, you contacted her demanding $4,000 for your husband's failing business. Did you think she would figure that out too?" Eleanor did not answer. Arthur then called Richard to the stand and questioned him about the hardware store finances, about the desperation that had led them to demand money from me while I was sleeping on a couch. He established that they had not just asked for help, they had demanded it, had framed it as an obligation I owed them, and had implied I was betraying family by not immediately complying. Jessica was called last. She cried on the stand, talking about how hard she had worked to build her career, how devastating it was to lose her job, how unfair it was that one Reddit post had ruined her life. Arthur's cross-examination was brief. "Miss Bennett, you testified that my client's post ruined your life. Did you respond when she told you she and your niece and nephew were homeless?" Jessica hesitated. "I was at a gathering. I did not see my phone right away. The read receipt shows you saw the message at 6:48 p.m. The photos you posted from that gathering show you were actively using your phone, taking pictures and posting them on social media. You saw her message. You chose not to respond. Is that correct? I did not know what to say, Jessica admitted. Did you know what to say 3 weeks later when your mother was asking her for $4,000? Jessica started crying harder. That was different. How? She did not have an answer. The judge, Judge Patricia Morrison, who had granted the restraining order, was hearing this case as well. She had listened to everything with the same neutral, assessing expression she had worn throughout. When both sides had presented their cases, she took a brief recess to review the evidence. When she returned, her verdict was swift and decisive. I am dismissing the defamation suit filed by Eleanor Thompson, Richard Thompson, and Jessica Bennett, she said. The plaintiff in that case did not name them, did not identify them, and cannot be held responsible for other people making connections based on publicly available information. Furthermore, truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and nothing in the evidence suggests the anonymous post contained false information. Eleanor's face went pale. Richard's jaw clenched. Jessica sobbed quietly. Regarding the countersuit filed by Chloe Bennett, Judge Morrison continued, I find in favor of the defendant. The evidence clearly establishes a pattern of financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and harassment. The threat to involve Child Protective Services was particularly egregious, an attempt to weaponize the legal system to force compliance. She looked directly at Eleanor, Richard, and Jessica. You have a daughter and sister who gave you thousands of dollars she could not afford while struggling to raise 2 children alone. When she experienced a crisis that left her and those children homeless, you did nothing. When she could no longer serve as your financial resource, you turned on her. This is not family. This is exploitation. The judge ordered them to pay my legal fees, which had accumulated to just over $12,000. She made the restraining order permanent, with provisions that it could only be modified if they petitioned the court and demonstrated significant changed circumstances. She ordered them to cease all contact, direct or indirect, with me and my children. She also entered a judgment for the $19,000 they owed me, though she acknowledged collection would be difficult given their financial situation, but it was on record, officially documented. Their exploitation of me was now a matter of legal record. As we left the courthouse that day, I felt something I had not felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but peace. A settling of something that had been turbulent and painful. I had stood up for myself. I had fought back, and I had won. Arthur shook my hand outside the courthouse. You were incredibly brave, Miss Bennett. Most people would have backed down. I had to do it, I said. For my kids, so they never think it is okay to be treated this way. The aftermath of the trial rippled through Sioux Falls over the following months. The local news covered the verdict, and while they did not use names due to privacy concerns, enough people knew the details that the story spread. Jessica never found another marketing job in Sioux Falls. The industry was small, people talked, and nobody wanted to hire someone with her baggage. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she eventually moved to Omaha, trying for a fresh start. Her marriage went through a rough patch, her husband apparently appalled by what had come out in court. But they stayed together and started counseling. Richard's hardware store declared bankruptcy 3 months after the trial. Without my monthly $300 contributions, without the $4,000 bailout they had demanded, they could not keep up with the debt. The store closed, and Richard took a job managing a department at one of the big box stores, the kind of corporate environment he had always claimed to despise. Eleanor and Richard lost their house to foreclosure. They moved into a small 2-bedroom rental on the east side of town, the same kind of neighborhood where I had lived in that apartment that burned. The social circle they had carefully cultivated over decades evaporated. People stopped inviting them to gatherings. Their church community, while not officially shunning them, grew distant. Brenda Walsh, who had made that Facebook post at Jessica's behest, faced her own consequences. Once her role became public knowledge through the trial, she became something of a pariah in the local parent community. People stopped trusting her, stopped including her in group activities. Her reputation for being a loyal friend became a reputation for being willing to attack vulnerable people on behalf of her friends. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. I kept working my 2 jobs, slowly saving money. The publicity from the case actually helped in an unexpected way. A local business owner who had followed the trial offered me a full-time position doing graphic design and social media management for his company. The pay was better than my retail job, the hours were regular, and I could drop the second job. For the first time in years, I only had one job, and could actually spend evenings with my children. Leo and Mia adjusted to our new normal. The nightmares about the fire gradually faded. They made friends in our new neighborhood. Leo joined a youth soccer league. Mia started taking dance classes at a community center. They were happy, resilient in the way children are when they feel loved and secure. Sarah remained a constant in our lives. She came over for dinner at least twice a week. She was Aunt Sarah to my children, more family than anyone who shared our blood. She taught Leo to play chess, braided elaborate designs into Mia's hair, and reminded me on hard days that I was stronger than I knew. 6 months after the trial, on a Saturday morning in late spring, I was working in our small backyard garden. Leo and Mia were playing nearby, Leo explaining something about Triceratops' defensive strategies to his sister, who was pretending to listen while she played with a toy unicorn. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a paralegal at Arthur's office. The subject line read, "Partial payment received." I opened the email. Richard had sent a check for $2,000, the first payment toward the $19,000 judgment. The email included a copy of the check and a brief note Richard had included. The note said, "This is all we can afford right now. We will try to send more when we can." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had done. Just a payment toward a legal obligation. I stared at that email for a long moment. Then I did something I would not have been able to do a year ago. I did not feel angry. I did not feel vindicated. I just felt done. I forwarded the email to my bank with instructions to deposit the money into the savings account I had opened for Leo and Mia. Then I closed my email and went back to gardening. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat on our small back porch with a cup of tea. The night was warm, the first real warmth of spring after a brutal South Dakota winter. I could hear my children's breathing from their rooms, peaceful and steady. I thought about where we had been a year ago. Standing in a parking lot watching our home burn, sleeping on a couch, terrified and desperate. I thought about the family I had believed in, the illusion that had been shattered so completely. But I also thought about where we were now. In our own home, modest but ours, with enough food and stability, with friends who showed up when it mattered, with legal protection from people who had tried to destroy us, with a future that looked, for the first time in years, genuinely hopeful. I had lost the family I was born into. But I had found something better, a chosen family, built on mutual respect and genuine love. I had lost a lot in that fire, material things that could never be replaced, but I had gained something more valuable, my self-respect, my boundaries, my understanding that love should never require self-destruction. They had tried to break me. They had tried to use my love as a weapon against me. They had tried to take my children, my peace, my sense of self, but I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. And that, I realized, sitting on that porch in the warm spring night, was the sweetest revenge of all. Not their downfall, though that had certainly happened. Not the legal victory, though that had been necessary. The sweetest revenge was building a life so full of genuine love and joy that they became irrelevant. My children will grow up knowing that family is not about blood. It is about who shows up when everything falls apart. They will know their worth is not measured by what they can give, but by who they are. And they will never, ever believe that love requires setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. If you are reading this and seeing yourself in my story, if you have given everything to people who gave you nothing back, if you have been made to feel guilty for having needs while their emergencies always came first, hear me now. You are not selfish for walking away. You are not cruel for saying no. You are not obligated to drown just because someone refuses to swim. It is okay to choose yourself. It is okay to build boundaries. It is okay to let toxic people face the consequences of losing you. I want to hear your story. Have you cut off family who treated you like an ATM? How did you find the courage to walk away? What did freedom look like on the other side? Drop it in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated. Subscribe because you deserve to know you are not alone in this fight. The family you choose will always matter more than the family that chose to use you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, surviving them is good. Thriving without them is better.